Happy Friday, Baylor College of Medicine and friends of Baylor. I'm going to channel my inner Fareed Zakaria today and start off with, here's my take. I have been reflecting on the pandemic now into our third year of this, and I want to show you some of the world data, but it's really interesting if you think about each of the countries in the world have really had different approaches to the pandemic. And even in our country, the states have been different, the community have been different. And as I reflect back on the past couple of years, one thing that's pretty obvious is that lockdowns have not been very good. I mean, they were okay in the beginning. We didn't know what was going on. But I mean, it really was crushing to the economies of the world. And, you know, we were one of the first that, you know, maybe we criticized for opening up too soon, but our economy came back faster. And China is still in lockdown, you know, and their economy is a disaster. And you'll see with Japan, they're making an interesting decision now to open up. They've been very, very conservative, but, you know, their economy is coming back as a result. One of the things we learned, I think, as we look back on it is kids need to be in school, no matter what. And, you know, the arguments about masking or not really aren't as important as having kids in school. We also learned that there's a lot of disparities in healthcare that were amplified by the pandemic. There's no question that communities that had less access to healthcare did less well and had higher mortality. I think we learned that misinformation really is a problem and amplifies the distrust of the medical profession. But I also think we didn't help ourselves. I think the medical profession has given out confusing and conflicting information. And so it's hard for the public to really know. So one of the things, you know, we've tried to do here is at least take a balanced view. And the only thing I remind everyone as I read these headlines that the left is now comfortable with COVID and the right's getting more comfortable with some vaccines. The only thing that is nonpartisan and apolitical is coronavirus. And the virus is just doing what it does. And we have to be a little bit smarter as people to be able to manage pandemics in the future. So, in the words of Fareed Zakaria, let's get started. So let's look at the world map. The hot spot is Japan. And Japan has done this on purpose. They've decided to open up their economy to get it going. And as a result, you can see they are now the big spike in the world. Now, it's mostly BA4, BA5, so they're lucky in that it is less pathogenic than some of the other earlier ones like Delta and Alpha, but they are having an increase in morbidity and mortality in that country. But they've made the decision their economy needs to get going. So, what are you going to do? I understand that decision. They already lost one prime minister because he handled the pandemic so poorly. Hopefully this one will do okay. In the United States, the case numbers are actually flat and coming down, which is good. And if you look at the heat map, a lot of it's concentrated in Tennessee and Kentucky, Alabama and Mississippi, but the rest of the country seems to be coming down. And if you look at the new admissions for patients, it's really finally pretty clearly coming down as we go into the fall. And finally, deaths are also beginning to come down. So it's taken a while for that. As I say all the time, death is a lagging indicator, but still it's coming down. The good news in our county, Harris County, is cases continue to drop. They're down 153 from 197 last week per 100,000, and we're under 20 admissions. So we're actually a moderate risk county. Our friends in Dimmitt County got bumped up to high, but they're actually moderate. I don't know. With one person being admitted to the hospital, raised their numbers up, to a higher percent. So, but they're actually tracking just like us. Dimmitt County's doing a good job. As for positivity in the Texas Medical Center, it continues to drop. We're down to 10%. If you look at hospital admissions in the Texas Medical Center, coming down dramatically. And the best news, of course, is the city's wastewater data continues to drop. And as long as that continues to drop, we'll know for the next couple of weeks we're in good shape. If you look at what is the dominant variant across the country, we've been consistently at BA4, BA5. Now it's 99.8% of all the viral variants. There is a subvariant, BA4.6, almost 7% of those BA4-5 variants. We don't know if that's worse or more infectious. We'll just have to keep an eye on it. Now, a lot of news on vaccines this week. As you know, the FDA just approved that the bivalent vaccines will be available. That's great news. I think that'll be very helpful as we go into the fall. The Biden administration has purchased in advance 105 million doses of the Pfizer bivalent vaccine, and 66 million doses of the Moderna bivalent. So I think we're going to, as soon as it becomes available, and it will be available at Baylor College of Medicine soon, we'll figure out when we put in our advanced order. But I think I would strongly encourage people to get that. It is, of course, the United States of America, and so Moderna is suing Pfizer. Of course they are. And we'll see what happens with that suit. And one other thing, we've forgotten about Novavax. Remember, Novavax was a really interesting vaccine that is a nanoparticle that expresses recombinant proteins, so more of a traditional vaccine, not the mRNA vaccines. Highly effective, 90% efficacy. That has now been approved for ages 12 to 17. So Novavax should be available soon. Now, for those people, as you know, I have been recommending to get your fourth dose as soon as possible. And the reason for that was a graph I showed last week. If you look at this graph, if you're unvaccinated versus having 2 boosters, you're 14-fold more likely to die from COVID than if you've been vaccinated. But the thing I didn't emphasize was that 3 shots or 1 booster is not much different from the primary 2 sets of vaccinations, but the second booster really did add a 3-fold benefit. And that's why I have been saying, I think, for people who ask me, go get your 4th shot. But since the FDA was much faster in approving the bivalent vaccine, I'd wait for your 4th shot until the bivalent's available. In the past, and I've told many people, just go get your 4th shot, but I didn't think the bivalent vaccine would be available till later in the fall. So now that it's available, I would wait. And the reason, the data are really pretty good. There's not been a clinical trial done to show that, real benefit, which some scientists have been arguing for, but I think that's not necessary because they have studies that show the immune response. And so if you have if you get vaccinated against the BA1 variant, you can see it's not very effective at dealing with the BA4 or 5. So BA1 responds to BA1, but does not treat BA4 or 5 very well, or at least you don't generate a giant immune response. The BA4 or 5 vaccine, which will be in the bivalent vaccine, is very effective at generating immune response against 4 or 5. And then the bivalent, which is a combination of the original and the new BA4 or 5 vaccine, is just as good as just the BA4 or 5 vaccine alone. So that gives you good evidence that if you've had the original vaccine and you get a BA4 or 5 booster, you'll have a very good immune response to BA4 or 5. So that's why I would just hold off and get that. Other news, Paxlovid, there's been a lot of talk about Paxlovid rebound. So the FDA has requested that Pfizer conduct a study looking at a second course. Of course you do that. I've told people who've had a rebound, just do a second course, but they're going to study it. I'm not sure it's really all that necessary, but we're going to study it. And there were 2 interesting natural history studies that came out. One is, when sort of describes how infectious you are and when you stop being infectious. My wife's been all over but this for me, and many scientists, we haven't really done the study that says, if you're exposed, when do you become infectious and how long are you infectious? So this was a good study in Lancet Respiratory Medicine that looked at 57 patients who were recently exposed in the community setting, and they did the right study. They did RNA PCR to see when you became infectious or when you became infected. They did in vitro cultures. They actually cultured the virus to see if it was viable, and then they compared that to the antigen test. And what they found, it's a little bit, I think we all knew this, but what they found was the average duration of infectiousness was about 5 days, and it varied between 3 and 7 days. But interestingly enough, 2/3 of the cases were still infectious after 5 days. So, when I got sick, I was testing myself with the antigen capture test. My antigen stayed positive for 7 or 8 days. What this shows is I was probably infectious. And so those recommendations to go back to work after 5 days, that was probably too early. So when you get infected, you probably should, what I would recommend is, probably isolate for at least 5 days and then do an antigen capture test and see whether or not you're negative. That's not the CDC recommendations, but that's what I think makes sense. There's also a really good paper in Science to just sort of explain how the vaccines work. And what you can see when you get vaccinated is you generate, hopefully, a very strong neutralizing antibody response and also a T cell response. And when you have a high neutralizing antibody response, it really it's not in the molecule that prevents it for getting infected, but it does prevent infection a lot better when your neutralizing antibodies are high. If you have low titers of neutralizing antibody, which is the second case, but you still have your T cells there, then what happens is you get infected, but you don't get severe disease because the T cell response prevents you from getting systemic or disseminated disease. But if you have low neutralizing antibodies and your T cells aren't responding to the vaccine, then you end up with severe disease. So that's kind of over the years we've figured that out, but that's sort of a nice review of that process. And finally, we have some good evidence for what's going on with long COVID. There's now a bunch of little clinical trials, some in phase 2, phase 3, and some that we think will be available soon. So we're getting a little bit more information about long COVID syndrome. And finally, I just want to say one thing about monkeypox. I'm kind of bored of monkeypox. The national numbers are coming down, and New York City, which has had the highest number of cases, is really dropping like a stone. So I think we are going to see this wave of monkeypox begin to disappear and disseminate. Hopefully it'll disappear completely. That said, volunteers are needed for a monkeypox vaccine study. The Baylor Vaccine Research Center is looking for volunteers. So if you want more information, just email monkeypoxvax@bcm.edu. And for the next wave, it'd be useful. So please, if you're interested in volunteering, volunteer. Finally, I want to end today with some shout-outs. First of all, I want to welcome Pavan Reddy, who has joined Baylor as the new director of the Dan L. Duncan Cancer Center. Terrific physician scientist. His own science is focused on the role of immune cells in blood diseases and cancer and transplant. We're delighted he's joined us. I also want to congratulate Baylor University. It was named among the nation's top 10 most trusted universities. They've come a long way, and that shows good leadership on their part. And finally, this is week 1 of college football, and everyone has hopes at this moment for their team. In our family, we have issues. Really big issues. And football is an issue, too. But anyway, Lily is out for her favorite team, and thank God she's on my side. So congratulations. Good luck for everybody who wants their football team to win this year. University of Texas, I don't know. Good luck. We're all hoping for you. Anyway, have a great weekend. I can't wait to see you next week.
Lily, go long!